Comedy is so visceral. The skit works or it doesn't work.
This is your point of view, and that your point of view has to be expressed. You know that this is what you're supposed to do.
There's 1,000 of us in this theatre, and everybody agrees.
Sit in the audience and I watch. I get to know when the laughs are going to come or not.
Since its inception post-Operation Lalang, the Instant Cafe Theatre Company has used comedy and political satire to skewer the corrupt, the powerful, and the ridiculous. Despite being told, "You can't say that," countless times, these clowns of comedy playfully exercised their right to freedom of expression. They became a beloved institution. Behind the laughter, the people at Instant Cafe talk about what plagues us most: corruption, discrimination, inequality, proving that actually, yes, you can and should say that.
Well, it started because, there were 4 friends, myself, Zalfian, myself, I get it wrong already, myself, Zahim, it was a long time ago, Jit Murad, Zalfian Al-Bakri, Andrew Lessie, and Andrew Lessie actually got approached by somebody who had a restaurant, Bonton, and she said, "Do you want to use the upstairs?" And for theatre, so he thought, why not? So he gathered us. And you can tell by the name Instant Cafe Theatre that essentially we wanted to do cafe theatre, which is kind of political comedy theatre, political satire, hence the kind of the nod to the theatre of the Weimar Republic, where people spoke their mind using comedy. So basically we called all our friends, not very many, and they all came, and most of them said it was a terrible idea. And then some stayed for the second meeting, some dropped out. Eventually a kind of group formed. So when we were trying to come up with a name for Instant Cafe, we finally decided, okay, since we're doing cafe theatre and we couldn't think of a name, let's just call it Cafe Theatre. But then to make it Malaysian, it would be Instant Cafe, because everybody drinks instant. At that point, there was no coffee culture, connoisseur, coffee culture, artisan coffees, etc. So it was like instant coffee, so Instant Cafe. And then also the idea was that the only place that you could find out what was really going on in the country was the coffee shops, because you wouldn't find stuff out in the newspapers. But if you went to the coffee shops and just listened, that's where everybody was talking about what was going on in the country.
Cam and I were talking about this earlier. What was our satire background at that point, and what was Malaysia's background in satire at that point? It was like basically Lat, Uthman Hafsham and gang at RTM doing things like Berita Kilat. It was very funny, safe. I mean, they didn't step on any toes, and that was it. You knew that these things were popular. You just find a way to put it in a story or to mention it in a witty way, and you'd get the laughs. It seemed as though the Malaysian public, at least the Malaysian public that was watching ICT, just wanted to hear that.
Yeah.
They just wanted these issues to be brought out. They wanted to know that yes, those people performing feel the same way, and everybody else is laughing too. So there's 1,000 of us in this theatre when we did a bigger shows, and everybody agrees. It was just nice to know that we all felt the same way, or a lot of people felt the same way about issue A, issue B.
Yeah.
Where it go? Where it go? Let's go and astronaut. Where it go? Where it go? Even out no one's to know. He don't care what we all say. Let the ringgit fall. He never uses it anyway.
So one big influence, or I think the long shadow that was cast on all of us in 1989 when Instant Cafe started was Operation Lalang, which was in October 1987. And Operation Lalang was the mass arrest of what they considered dissidents, intellectuals, opposition leaders, unionists. Newspapers were shut down. There was a curfew imposed on the country. And this really at this period of fear, right, that all of us went through, and that continued to make people feel they can't say things in their own country. They did not have that freedom of expression. So of course Instant Cafe then, which was formed in 1989, I think underneath its formation was the desire to say things that we were told you can't say. Because I think 2 years later, we were tired of being told, you can't say that, you can't talk about this, this is very sensitive, you should care about this, stay in your silo. I remember somebody saying, that's not your concern, you're not Malay. Saying to somebody else, why do you care about that, you're not Chinese. So this kind of trying to put us into these racial silos was really happening, I think, around this time. So I think that in 1989, when we formed Instant Cafe, it was a kind of a reaction to being told you can't say things, and yet us seeing what people were saying elsewhere in the world, you know, whether it was SNL or Not the 9 O'Clock News or Monty Python or Spitting Image, it was, well, those are our influences also. We are Malaysian, but we are also very global citizens. You don't want us to stay in this narrow-minded world. Those of us who were there when Operation Lalang happened, that was not, you know, it really was like this thundercloud. And it was like somebody sat on you, right? Somebody very large sat on you. And it was very suffocating. And, you know, I remember like my aunts and things saying, oh, this is going to be like May 69 all over again, you know, buy provisions, buy sardine and stock it up and all the rest of it. So, it really made people feel quite paralyzed. And everybody became very serious. Now, we wanted to say serious things as well, but you were kind of told you're not allowed to talk about these things.
Final question, YB, about corruption.
You see, everybody is still accusing us of corruption. People are saying that we take bribes, but we never take bribes. I never take bribes. I take gifts.
And what's the difference between a bribe and a gift?
A bribe is when we ask for it.
Yeah, which is why we never ask.
Yeah, we only suggest.
We only suggest.
Just like now, I would like to suggest to you, Mr. Lecce, that you stop asking us questions. And I'd like to suggest that you hand over the donation.
Yeah, because we are going to get it anyway, whether you like it or not.
A big hand, ladies and gentlemen, for 2 Malaysian Deputy Prime Ministers in Only Money Matters.
I mean, this was in 1990, 1991. I don't even know who it was, who the two politicians were at the time who inspired us. It was always the character who is a kind of a bit of the loser, and my character was always a bit of the loser character. And Zahim's character was always the one who was a bit more in charge, a bit more like sure of himself, a bit more of the winner character.
Suave,
and we were always, suave, and we were always adversarial. So the first sketch that we did, we're trying to explain to the public, so we have a press conference where we explain to the public, basically the reporters ask us a whole bunch of questions. So it was a very good format because we could put in all the big questions of the day about corruption, about yet another deal that's, you know, like, which is a bit suspect, just about governance in general. And the reporters, which often we planted in the audience, the Instant Cafe actors, we planted in the audience to then shout these questions at us as if the audience are fooled, they're not. And then we would answer them as these two deputy minister characters. And we always ended the sketch by hugging each other, and as we hugged each other, we would pull out knives and try to stab each other in the back, which, you know, is still happening today. The backstabbing is like, you know, has really become out in the open in a way that it wasn't back then, and we were satirizing it back then by putting it out into the open. Now it wouldn't be satire. Now it's like,
This was one of my favorite skits, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, because the characters were just so spot on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, they just really, like, you know, when you concentrated these two types of characters in terms of, you know, capturing the two different types of, you know, politicians out there, they were just so perfect. And
You think the tone was very familiar from what you heard on television.
Yes.
Where you heard, you know, that kind of arrogance or that kind of smarmy kind of thing. But the thing is about...
And the lying, of course, the lying, the open lying and the obvious lying but pretending they're telling the truth.
The fake friendliness.
Yeah.
We can't really pinpoint corruption. And corruption, also is something which you don't really know the numbers. You know it's happening. Sometimes things are unveiled, but not all the time.
But can I just say, with this also is the kind of the complicity of, or for the audience. We all recognize these characters. And the audience at some point in their lives, if they are ambitious in business at all, will probably find themselves in a situation, if they have not already, where they're going to be confronted with this and have to make a choice.
Yeah.
And so the laughter is actually quite a nervous laugh.
Yes, yes. It's a testament to just how much corruption this country has generated over 32 years, you know, and all the kind of hand-wringing about money politics, and we must put an end to money politics, and yet they haven't actually worked towards putting an end to money politics. In fact, it feels like almost now like, well, we have to accept money politics as long as they don't steal too much and too obviously. It's like, it's kind of part of the game.
Also can't steal too much because there's not much left.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
But in all other areas, though, Instant Cafe has been successful in crushing bad practices. Unfortunately, we have not succeeded yet with corruption.
yes, that's right. Yes.
My lord, are you saying that for a villa in Switzerland, are you saying that judges can be bought?
Young man, no, the very idea, no, of course not. But judgments can be bought. For the price of, say, a nice house in Country Heights, you won't find a better deal in town than with me.
So if I were to offer you a villa in Putrajaya, my lord?
That will do nicely, thank you.
My lord, Jalan Terase Bangsa, 2 minutes away from your favorite pub.
But my lord, you can't be serious.
Actually, the young man is right, you know. Bangsa's getting too hipster these days.
My lord, my client is prepared to pay you enough money for you to buy yourself a one-way ticket on the next Malaysian space mission to Mars.
Space, the final frontier. I could be just like Matt Damon.
But...
Sold to you, sir. Sorry, young man, but the sky is my limit. Sold to you, sir, for a place in space and free dental care for life.
Damn!
Don't worry, young man. Keep practicing. You'll learn.
Yeah, this is Wish.
So with Judgmental Singh, it was because of the Anwar trials, the sodomy trials that were ongoing. So very, of course, inspired by Judge Augustine Paul and reading in the papers every day. But of course, the independence of the judicial system had been so greatly compromised from the judicial crisis of 1988. You know, so and I think that was something that was quite important to me. My father Ghost wrote a book for Saleh Abbas called Mayday for Justice, right, where he talked about what happened to Saleh Abbas and, of course, the entire corruption of the decimation of the judicial system at that time. And again, very painful, I think, episode for our collective history. And it's interesting now to see that the judiciary is has recovered. They're fighting back quite a lot, quite well. But this sketch came out of that time. And so then Judgmental was called in for ICT service and quite a few sketches. But every time he wanted to try people for sodomy, no matter what the...
And he just really enjoyed the subject.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Please tell me more.
Yes.
He's got this, learned judge who's showing him the ropes, so to speak, right? And in a way, his world is just, or everything that he knows about justice and the legal system is basically turned upside down in this skit about how justice can't be bought, but judges can be bought
for the price of a nice corner house in Bangsa.
Exactly, and so how things are done, and this very naive young lawyer suddenly realizes, oh, okay, so this is how it's going to be, and I think at the end of the moment of that skit, it's like showing to the audience, look, this is how it is. But if you sadly, you have to do something. You have to fight back, right? And that's the realization, right? So, again, with satire, even though it's humorous, it's satire is used as a form of social criticism about what's happening, and in this case, it's with the justice system and that's why that's how YB. I mean, that's how the judgmental scene was born. So yeah.
Two very different characters.
Yes.
So
Very different. Played by the same actor. But
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
There was
Actually,
that line, I think, in another skit, which just, crowns it all, which is like, they say that we don't have justice in Malaysia. That's wrong. We have the best justice money can buy. I mean, that literally is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like that line from, I think, Baudelaire, who says, that comedy makes you open your mouth wide so that the truth can slip in. And I think that's what it was. You make people laugh so that then they are also hearing the truth. But you kind of then you give them the truth, and then you're like, and here's a bit of sugar just to make it, help the medicine go down a little bit. Yeah. And I think we discovered that over time, right? Is when you play the comedy, and then when you say something a bit sharp, that's actually about the people in the audience as well, right? Because it's.
So first you make them laugh, and then you make them think, right? And right. Yeah. So for me, and the thing is, when you're on stage, you can literally hear the pin drop in the audience. Right, and those moments.
And they were dropping pins. Why? You don't know. They were just like,
right? I mean,
hell to clean up.
better than Rotten Tomatoes.
And I think that's why for me comedy, it's about telling the truth, right? And I never really found what we did ever to be so, sensational or controversial or anything like that, because a lot of the stuff was already out there in the press.
Yeah.
Things were headlines. So it's not like we're creating stuff up. We're actually just showing you or telling you the truth. And for me, that was what excited me the most, right? About putting this out to them, which I always find quite ironic, right? Because we're all reading about this in the newspaper. People are talking about it at the mamak shops. We're just putting it here on stage, and literally putting a mirror back up at you, so that you can see yourself and the state that we are in.
And it's really great when the big laughs come, and I see this convulsive wave go back through the audience. And I'm thinking, like, at this precise second, 300-400 people are agreeing to the same thing. A laugh is an agreement. So it's a very obvious agreement, because a laughter is to show to another person that you mean no harm. To create not create community, but to sort of find community in the darkness, that you are in a community with that person over there you don't know, it's really, it's a valuable thing. We can watch our internet on our own, we can watch TV on our own. It means something to be able to then go to a place and be amongst like-minded people who all agree at precisely the same moment that joke really didn't work.
But that thing is true.
But it's true.
But that thing that they're saying is true.
Let's say you made a joke about a politician, and you didn't just get laughs, you got people going, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
People literally, and that brought it home for me, because I felt as though some things go beyond funny to these people. Yeah, they're allowing their anger and frustration to be assuaged somehow, to be released somehow. And it's not always through laughter, it's through like a grain.
And sometimes it's through tears.
Sometimes,
tears. Yeah.
But I think, that whole approach of having everybody create is very important, because it's also about empowering you to feel you have a voice. And I remember for one of the shows we did, the Bollywood Awards, and the actors did a lot of writing for the Bollywood Awards, a lot of improvising. Maybe not all the material went on stage, but half of it found its way on stage. And I remember being stage left, about to go on as Ribena Berry, and one of the actresses was standing next to me, and she was listening to that sketch, and somebody said a line, and she says, "Oh, I wrote that line." And her face was so full of delight. I just remember that and thought, yeah, that's what it makes it empowering. It's because she said, I wrote something that somebody else says, and it's making people laugh. And it means something to share that laughter. And I think that shared laughter and that sense of feeling empowered and brave, because it is brave to laugh in a society where you're told you can't, right? Where you're told you're not allowed to thumb your nose.
Thank you. My name is How You Been, and welcome to You Can't Say That, the Malaysian quiz show where we find out if you know what you can and cannot say here in Malaysia.
there's been many people who've come through that revolving door and been part of it because this is what they felt was important, you know, to be part of a society, and I guess we are a cafe society, saying something about their reality, you know, and expressing what it was like to live in this bizarre reality that, you know, we call Malaysia, that's constantly trying to buffeting you, making you feel that you don't have a right to your opinion, and then you're thinking, because you're with other like-minded people, it's like, hold on a minute, we are entitled to our opinion, and we're entitled to express it as well. And I think that was important.
Do you remember the rules?
Not really.
It doesn't matter really because I'll be making it up as I go along.
But that doesn't sound fair.
You can't say that.
Is this right?
You can't say that.
There must be more transparency.
You can't say that.
Ah, I got it.
Okay, good. Now, before we start.
Job, before we start, can I ask, what government department will the job be in?
Does it matter? They're all the same.
Oops, you can't say that.
Yeah.
What's your solution, Carrie, to world peace?
World peace, we gotta stop blaming each other. Yeah, gotta start understanding each other, talking to each other, innit? Yeah. You know, that's what I'm saying, Sean. I mean, you think that the Malays don't want a chance? No, they want a chance.
Of course they do.
You think the Indians don't feel neglected? We do.
What?
You think the Chinese don't have dreams and aspirations? You do, right? Yeah. Everybody just wants to be equal.
Yeah, just want to be treated equally.
Treated equally, and that's the thing, right? Last election, that was the promise. Just equality, man. Just give us a level playing field. That's all we want. Give us a level playing field, and we'll get on with it and talk to each other. Isn't that what we want? Yeah.
Just talk to each other.
Talk to each other.
How
It's radical.
Instant Cafes always wanted, and I think what many of us, I don't think just middle class, I think people in general want to feel they want equality, but you know, we get divided by politicians who have other agenda. And I think like with the character of Curry Spice, I don't know, I think Zalfian, this was your era, Curry Spice. I mean, you wrote a lot of Curry Spice bits as well.
I did, yeah. Curry Spice as a character was an outlet, I think, for you, Joe, and in a way that, you know, she just says it, right? Curry Spice, there's no censorship, there's no, like, she will just, you know, say it as it is. It's like almost every other, you know, paragraph is like another climax, isn't it? In the sense that she's hitting...
She's multiple, yeah.
Multiple climax, yes. That, you know, she's really trying to drive home the point. And it's so true that the audience are so in agreement of it and also taken by it and really motivated by what it is that she has to say, because it is the collective shared feeling of what the country is feeling at that point in time. And I think that's why Curry Spice is so powerful in that particular scene.
Curry Spice is this new character, really, who is representative of younger Malaysians, not necessarily of our audience who are not necessarily that young themselves, but who, and I've noticed this, is that there are these new generations of people who are standing up for what they believe in, who are going off on the streets, who are waiting outside police stations for their number to be released at 2 in the morning. And there are these new lawyers who I don't recognize, representing them and everything. And there are more of them than you know, when ICT began, there was just a handful of people, and there was just you 4 on the, or 17 on the stage. The numbers are greater now. And I think that Curry Spice is, yes, representative of them. And it would be nice if she were able to speak to them more.
It's a huge change, because when you had the Curry Spice type characters, like the young lawyer characters, they were always victims, always being knocked about. Curry Spice has that podium. She goes up there, she gets really personal. She talks about her family, no shame in it at all. She talks about race, Like no, like you said, no filter.
Yeah.
Okay, if she's gonna make fun of
And
any
sexuality as well.
sexuality, any race, she just goes on and she doesn't stop. She doesn't apologize. She just goes, and that's a new character. It's a very new character, and it's also, like you said earlier, it is what we hoped that ICT or the stuff that we've been doing, the kind of voices that we've actually kind of managed to influence in a small way, or voices that will come and take our place, really.
Yes. She should be the next Prime Minister of Malaysia because she is a bisexual Indian woman from Central, so that she's a minority, and it's time for minority voices to get heard. So that's about equality, right?
Yeah.
Equality says the most minority person has the same rights as the most majority. And you know, we believe here, unfortunately, in this idea that democracy equals majority, but it's not. Majority is tyranny. The majority voice is the voice of tyranny. Democracy is taking care of the minority voice, making sure the minority voice gets heard. That's democracy. But this is something which we're constantly being told, oh no, but this is what the majority wants. This is what the people out in the rural areas want. And that's used to kind of like beat us because it's a misunderstanding completely of the idea of democracy and equality.
Also, like if the voice of the minority and ideas in general, just the march of ideas, is not heard by the majority, then they won't know it's there.
Yes.
It's like you've got a majority that really has been blinkered to look in one direction,
Yes,
in one
because
direction
you're told
only.
you can't say that. So if the minority is told you can't say that, the majority will never know what's going on, right? So, and if the majority also don't express their ideas, the minority also will not understand each other. So it's this othering of each other that happens, right? And that's different from when your parents were young, when it was just normal to have those sorts of relationships. So it's systemic racism, it's systemic inequalities, it's how it's embedded into institutions. It's like you can't go there, you can't do this. And then of course it's like people counter with their, oh, okay, well then you can't have this. Right, so everybody ends up in their silo. You can't use my cultural traditions. You can't be part of certain institutions. Then we don't have a nation. And I think the thing that Curry Spice says in her show, in her part of the show, is she says that if you can believe that I exist, then you can believe anything. And that again, it goes back to the don't stop believing. So Curry Spice is part of that Instant Cafe tradition of ending a show by saying, please believe, not in government, believe in each other. That believe that what we want is important. And so she ends up by saying, imagine the nation you want, and that what you really need is imagination. Because if you have imagination, you can imagine that a person who's so different from you can still be your friend, can still be your chum, or still you can not tolerate them, but kind of enjoy their differences, as opposed to feeling afraid of them.
And it's funny because we've been talking about all the things that you can't say, but when it comes to Curry Spice, she says it all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in a way, I mean, she's disruptive to the system, right? There's that point in the show where she says, "Screw the system," right? I'm going to kick the system down.
Yeah.
And coming back to Cam's point, there's a lot more of those people now doing that, right? So there are people who, ultimately, I mean, the way I see Curry Spice is she is, and I think why the audience react to her so well is because ultimately she is a true patriot, right? She is actually doing this for the greater good, for the nation, and that whole part about imagination at the closing of the whole skit is about wanting for a better Malaysia, you know, for all of us.
Yeah.
That's when I realised, Sean, life is really short, man.
Yeah.
You can't afford to waste it, can you? Yeah. And I realised if you don't seize the day and take charge of your life, if you don't lead the life you want to live, right? If you don't stop letting other people tell you how to live your life, then one day you find yourself getting married to a banana tree. And you'll be around. Yeah. So I realised you gotta believe in yourself. You gotta do what you feel is right.
Yep.
Be yourself,
Yep.
man. Yeah. Imagine a better future for yourself. The imagination is a very powerful thing, Sean. Yeah. Imagination, empathy, understanding, that's all you really need. That's all you need to make the world a better place. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it is. That's why I should be Prime Minister.
Easy. Yeah.
We made comedy out of love for our country. We tried to make you laugh Sometimes it was really tough, but some people thought it wrong for us to criticize in song. Said it's wrong to write our skits which pokes fun at politics. Yes, we like to criticize, but only those which we despise.